There's a version of this story that happens to almost everyone. You meet someone. Something about them feels different, electric, almost inevitable. Your friends see red flags immediately. You see destiny. Months later, when it falls apart exactly the way everyone warned you it would, you ask yourself the same question millions of people have asked before you. Why do I keep doing this? Why do I fall for people who are bad for me? The answer isn't about bad judgment. It isn't about low self-esteem, even though it can feel that way in the aftermath. The real answer is written into your nervous system before you were old enough to speak, and it has almost nothing to do with the person you just fell for. It has to do with the very first people you ever loved. In the 1950s, a British psychiatrist named John Bowlby started studying something that seemed simple on the surface. What happens to children who are separated from their caregivers? What he found reshaped psychology permanently. Bowlby proposed that humans are born with an innate attachment system, a kind of built-in wiring that bonds infants to their caregivers for survival. A baby left alone is a baby who dies. So evolution built a powerful alarm system into every human infant, one that screams for connection the moment it senses distance. But here's the part that matters for your love life today. Bowlby didn't just say we need connection. He said the specific way our caregivers responded to that need, consistently, inconsistently, warmly, coldly, would carve a template, a blueprint for what love is supposed to feel like. And that blueprint, once formed in early childhood, would quietly run in the background for the rest of your life. A few years later, a developmental psychologist named Mary Ainsworth turned Bowlby's theory into something you could actually observe. She designed an experiment called the Strange Situation. A toddler and their mother would be placed in a room together, then the mother would briefly leave. Then she'd come back. Ainsworth watched closely, not at the moment of separation, but at the moment of reunion. That's where the real information was. Some toddlers were distressed when their mother left, but calmed down quickly and happily when she returned. Ainsworth called these children securely attached, but other children showed something stranger. They'd get upset when the mother left, and then, when she came back, they wouldn't simply calm down. They'd cling and push away at the same time, reach for her and swat at her, seek comfort and reject it in the same breath. Ainsworth called this pattern anxious ambivalent attachment. And there was a third group entirely, children who barely reacted to the separation at all, who seemed almost indifferent, even though physiological measurements showed their stress hormones spiking just as high as everyone else's. She called that one avoidant attachment. Here's why this childhood experiment explains your adult dating history better than any dating app algorithm. If your early caregiving was warm, responsive, and consistent, love feels calm to your nervous system as an adult. If your early caregiving was inconsistent, sometimes warm, sometimes distant, unpredictable in a way you couldn't control, your nervous system learned something different. It learned that love is something you have to chase, something that disappears if you're not vigilant, something that comes with a current of anxiety running underneath it. And this is the trap. As adults, people with this kind of history don't feel it as anxiety. They feel it as chemistry. The nervous system has quietly rewired the word love to mean uncertain, and calm, secure, reliable relationships often just feel boring by comparison. Not because they are boring, because the nervous system associates safety with the absence of love, since safety was never what love felt like the first time around. Now bring in the brain chemistry, because this is where it gets almost unfair. In the early 2000s, a biological anthropologist named Helen Fisher ran brain imaging studies on people who had recently fallen intensely in love. She found something that looked less like romance and more like addiction. The same neural regions that light up in cocaine users lit up in the brains of people newly in love. Dopamine-rich areas tied to craving, focus, and motivation, not areas tied to pleasure and contentment. Being in love, neurologically, resembles wanting something you don't fully have yet, far more than it resembles the satisfaction of having it. Fisher didn't stop there. Working alongside neuroscientist Lucy Brown, she later scanned the brains of people who had just been through a painful breakup, people who described themselves as still desperately in love with someone who had rejected them. Logic says heartbreak should look like grief, like sadness, like withdrawal. Instead, their brains showed even more activation in the reward and craving centers than the brains of happily in love couples. Rejection didn't turn the wanting off, it turned it up. Put those two pieces of research together and you get something genuinely unsettling. Romantic love is built on uncertainty and craving, not certainty and comfort. And someone who is emotionally unavailable, someone who is warm one day and distant the next, someone who keeps you slightly off balance, is accidentally pulling the exact lever that makes those reward circuits fire hardest. Not because they're more lovable, because they're less predictable, and your dopamine system was never built to reward predictability. It was built to reward pursuit. Now overlay that on top of an anxious attachment style formed in childhood, and you get a nervous system that is doubly primed. It already associates love with unpredictability from its earliest template. And it's wired, like every human brain, to release the most dopamine in response to uncertain rewards rather than guaranteed ones. Someone stable, warm, and consistent doesn't trigger either system. Someone who runs hot and cold triggers both simultaneously. Your body reads that combination not as a warning sign. It reads it as intensity, as chemistry, as the real thing, finally. This is why the advice to just choose someone kind and reliable can feel almost insulting to someone caught in this pattern. It's not that they don't understand kindness is good for them intellectually. It's that kindness, at first, doesn't register in the nervous system as love at all. It registers as flat. Familiar patterns feel like truth, even when the pattern is the thing hurting you. There's a term for this in relationship psychology, popularized by psychiatrist Amir Levine and psychologist Rachel Heller in their work on attachment theory applied to adult relationships. They describe how anxiously attached people are frequently, disproportionately, drawn to avoidantly attached people, not despite the emotional distance, but partly because of it. The avoidant partner's push-pull behavior recreates precisely the inconsistent caregiving pattern the anxious partner's nervous system learned to associate with love in the first place. Two attachment styles that shouldn't fit together end up locking in with uncomfortable precision, like two broken gears that happen to mesh. So when you meet someone who's hot and cold, who texts back immediately one day and disappears for 3 days the next, who makes you feel like you have to earn their attention, you're not encountering someone uniquely magnetic. You're encountering a stimulus almost perfectly engineered, by coincidence of your own history, to override your rational judgment. Your friends can see the pattern clearly from the outside because they don't have your specific childhood wiring reacting to it. You can't see it as clearly from the inside because the wiring isn't offering you a warning. It's offering you a feeling that feels exactly like falling in love always has. Here's the genuinely hopeful part, though. Attachment styles are not a life sentence. Researchers who study this, including Bowlby's own later work, found that attachment patterns can shift, sometimes significantly, through what's called earned security. This can come from a long-term relationship with someone securely attached, from therapy, or simply from becoming aware enough of the pattern that you can catch it happening in real time instead of being fully swept up in it. Awareness doesn't erase the initial pull, but it changes what you do with it. The next time you feel that unmistakable spark with someone who runs hot and cold, someone who keeps you guessing, someone your friends seem strangely nervous about, it's worth pausing and asking yourself an uncomfortable question. Is this spark, or is this just your nervous system recognizing an old familiar shape? A shape it learned to call love a very long time ago, long before you had any say in the matter. Because the goal was never to fall for someone who makes your nervous system panic in a way that feels thrilling. The goal was always to fall for someone who lets it finally, for the first time, relax. If your brain just made a little more sense to you, that's the whole point of this channel. New videos on the ancient wiring behind modern behavior every week. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.